So without further ado, come forward, silent rogue, and receive thy prize. What do you do? Walk away from me. That's people's work. Sorry. Hey, fuck you.
In the streets of South Boston, 4 young men sit around a dirty table in the back of a rundown bar, laughing too loud and drinking too much the way only guys who grew up together know how to do. The biggest one is holding court, telling some story that has the whole table losing their minds, and everyone around him is falling over each other trying to get a word in. The one sitting right next to him, though, the quiet one, handsome, confident in a way that never needed to announce itself, his name is Will Hunting. He is 20 years old. He works as a janitor. He lives alone in a one-room apartment with bare walls, a small bed, and a stack of over 20 library books sitting beside it that he reads at roughly a page per second. The way most people flip through a magazine. Nobody at that table knows this about him. Nobody in South Boston knows this about him, and Will Hunting has every intention of keeping it that way. He did not have an easy start. He was bounced through 3 foster homes before the state finally stopped moving him, removed from each one for the same reason listed in his court records: serious physical abuse. He learned early that the world was not going to go out of its way to protect him, and so he built something inside himself that was harder than anything the world had thrown at him. Not bitterness exactly. More like armor. An armor made of intelligence so vast and so sharp that no person he had ever met had managed to get through it, and no person had ever cared enough to try. During the day, he mops floors and empties trash cans and pushes a cart through hallways full of people who look straight past him. At night, he comes home and reads until morning because sleep does not come easily to a mind that never fully turns off. That is his life. That is all he has ever allowed his life to be. Across the river at MIT, a very different world is operating. Professor Gerald Lambeau is one of the most decorated mathematicians alive. He won the Fields Medal in 1986, which is effectively the Nobel Prize of the mathematics world. He teaches graduate students who have spent their entire academic careers preparing to sit in his classroom. And on one particular morning, he walks to his lectern, surveys his packed room, and makes an announcement that turns every pen in the building still.
I also put an advanced Fourier system on the main hallway chalkboard. And I'm hoping that one of you might prove it by the end of the semester. And the person to do so will not only be in my good graces, but also go on to fame and fortune.
He tells the class he is posting an advanced mathematical problem on the main hallway chalkboard. He tells them the first person to solve it will go down in history. The students groaned. They knew exactly what that meant. This was not a regular exercise. This was the kind of mathematics that had stumped entire rooms full of brilliant people for years without resolution. Lambeau smiled at their discomfort and dismissed the class. On his way out, he posted the problem on the public chalkboard in the hallway where any student passing through could attempt it. Then he went home, fully expecting it to sit there untouched for the rest of the semester. What he did not account for was the young man mopping the floor 3 feet away from that chalkboard every single night. The young man who had been quietly consuming advanced mathematics from library books for years. The young man who forgot nothing he had ever read. One evening on his regular shift, Will Hunting walked past that problem and stopped walking. A few weeks passed. Then one night, Lambeau was leaving his office late when he heard a faint sound coming from the hallway, a kind of quiet, focused sound. He followed it around the corner and stopped. A figure in silhouette stood at the chalkboard with a mop and bucket resting beside him, moving through the proof with the speed and certainty of someone who was not guessing, not working it out, already knew it. Lambeau stepped closer.
Sorry. What do you do? Sorry. That's people's work. You can't graffiti here. Don't you walk away from me. Hey, fuck you. Oh my God.
And told the figure to stop. Will looked up immediately and said he was sorry and started to shuffle away. Lambeau followed him down the hallway. He told Will not to walk away, that this was people's work, that he could not just write on that board. Will did not slow down. He said, "Hey," and kept walking. Lambeau stood in the empty hallway for a moment, then turned to the board to assess whatever damage the janitor had caused. He scanned the proof once, scanned it again. His face changed entirely. He could not believe what he was looking at. The next morning, Lambeau announced to an even more crowded classroom that the impossible problem had been solved. Not by a graduate student, not by a colleague, by someone who had signed no name and left no trace. The MIT school paper ran the story within days. A silhouetted figure on the front page with a question mark above the headline. The mystery math magician strikes again. The whole faculty was talking about it. They were searching for a genius. They had absolutely no idea they were searching for the man cleaning their building. Lambo posted a second problem on the board, harder than the first. He announced to the class that the gauntlet had been thrown down and answered with vigor. If the mystery mathematician wanted to come forward, here was another chance. The faculty watched that board every day. Nothing happened. Because Will Hunting was back in South Boston, doing what South Boston had always expected of him. It was an ordinary afternoon when Will spotted someone on the street who used to beat him up in kindergarten. Most people would have kept walking. Will jogged across the street smiling like he was going to say hello and then hit him with a punch that knocked him out cold. What followed was a street fight involving 4 other men and 3 police officers, one of whom left the scene with a broken knee. By the end of it, Will was face down on a patrol car hood, headed back to court. In the courtroom, Will defended himself. He cited legal precedent dating back to 1789, quoted scholars from 1887, and had the judge visibly torn between sending him down and wanting to hear more. But a police officer was in the hospital. Will Hunting was going to prison. That is when Professor Lambo walked through the back door of that courtroom. He had tracked Will through a parole employment card from the Buildings and Grounds Department. The man who had spent weeks trying to unmask the mystery mathematician had found him in handcuffs. He asked for a minute with the court. The deal was clean and simple. Will walks free under 2 conditions. Lambo offered Will his freedom in exchange for 2 things. Meet with him twice a week for mathematics, and meet with a therapist. Will barely blinked.
I'll do the math, but I'm not going to meet with any fucking therapist.
He asked if he agreed to this, whether he walked right now. Lambo said yes. Will said he would do the work, but he was not going to meet with a therapist. He met with the therapist. What followed over the next several weeks was one of the most quietly devastating displays of psychological warfare ever conducted from a therapy chair. Will read each therapist's published work before the first session. He arrived already knowing more about the person sitting across from him than that person knew about themselves. The first therapist, a man who had written 4 books and was considered one of the brightest in his field, lasted a single session. Will figured out something personal about the man and said so directly and calmly. The man picked up his things and walked out without looking back. The second did not last much longer. Then came the hypnotist. Lambo sat outside in the hallway as the hypnotist snapped his fingers and Will's head went back and his eyes closed, which seemed promising for about 30 seconds. Then Will opened his mouth and started singing at full volume.
Sky rockets in flight.
The hypnotist was out the door before Lambo could stand up. Will sat in the empty room laughing to himself. Lambo was running out of names on his list. Meanwhile, Will had found something that was not a therapy session and was not a math problem. There was a Harvard bar where he and his friends had started showing up in the evenings. One night, a graduate student decided to publicly embarrass one of Will's friends in front of 2 women he was trying to impress, using borrowed arguments from academic texts he had barely read. Will watched from across the room for about 30 seconds. Then he stepped in.
You dropped $150,000 on a fucking education you could have got for $1.50 in late charges at the public library. Pete Garrison, probably.
He told the student that, of course, that was his contention. He was a first-year grad student who had just finished some Marxian historian, and so naturally, that was what he believed until next month when he got to the next author and changed his mind again. He cited the exact page number of the book the student had been quoting without attribution, dismantled his entire argument in under 2 minutes in front of the 2 women the student had been trying to impress. Then he turned to leave and told the student he had dropped $150,000 on an education he could have picked up for $1.50 in late charges at the public library. One of the 2 women was named Skylar. She waited 45 minutes for Will to come talk to her. Then she walked over herself, gave him her number, and left. He called her the next morning using his one permitted legal phone call from county jail, not to reach a lawyer, to ask her out. She answered. They went for caramels. Lambo, now completely out of qualified therapists willing to return, made one final call, his college roommate. A man from South Boston who now taught community college classes to half-empty rooms and had not quite been himself since the day his wife died. His name was Sean McGuire. He agreed to meet the boy once. Sean McGuire taught a class called Dying and Bereavement to 15 students in a lecture hall built for 60. He was solidly built, dressed simply, and had the kind of tired in his eyes that does not come from a bad night of sleep. It comes from carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. His apartment was small and cluttered, a framed magazine cover on the wall, a nearly empty bottle of whiskey on the kitchen table. He was a man who had loved something with everything he had and watched it leave him, and had kept going anyway, which is its own kind of strength. Lambo warned Sean before the first session.
It's a poker game with this kid. Don't let him know what you got.
He told him that any vulnerability Will sensed, he would exploit, that it was a poker game with this young man and Sean should not let him see what he had. Will walked into Sean's office and got to work immediately. He moved through the bookshelves and called out every wrong choice. He walked over to a small painting hanging on the wall behind the desk. A painting of a sailboat caught in a storm. Sean had painted it himself. Will studied it for a moment, then said it was a real piece of work.
It's a real piece of shit. Tell me what you really think. It's the coloring. Married the wrong woman.
Poor color, lousy use of space. He said he thought Sean was one step away from cutting his ear off. That he thought Sean had been in the middle of a storm once, crying for the harbor, and had done what he had to do to get out. That maybe he had become a psychologist. Maybe he had married the wrong woman. In one motion, Sean crossed the room and had Will by the throat against the wall. He told Will that if he ever disrespected his wife again, he would end him. Will held his gaze without flinching and said time was up.
Time's up.
He walked out past Lambo in the hallway without breaking stride. Sean stood alone in his office, staring at his painting. Then he picked up the phone and told Lambo to make sure the kid was there on Thursday at 4. Their second session was 1 full hour of complete silence. Will sat down and spent 60 minutes counting the seconds until time ran out, then stood and left without a word exchanged. Sean told Lambo it was actually impressive. The session that changed things happened outside on Boston Common. Sean took Will to the bleachers overlooking a quiet pond and told him plainly what he had been thinking since their first meeting.
You're just a kid. You've never been out of Boston. You can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel.
He told Will he was just a boy who had never been out of Boston. That if you asked him about art, he could give you the skinny on every art book ever written, but he could not tell you what it smelled like in the Sistine Chapel because he had never stood there and looked up at that ceiling. That if you asked him about love, you would get a sonnet, but he had never looked at a woman and been truly vulnerable. That he presumed to know so much about Sean because of a painting he had seen. But he did not know the first thing about real loss. Will said nothing. That was new. Skylar asked Will to come to California with her one night while they were lying in her room and the rest of the world was quiet. She said she wanted him to come. That she just knew. Will started building an argument brick by brick about why it could not work, escalating with,
Will, come to California with me.
Yeah, but how do you know?
I just know.
every sentence, until Skylar finally said what she had been holding back for weeks. She asked him what he was so scared of.
What are you so scared of?
He told her she just wanted a story, that she planned to go back to her world and tell people she had spent time with someone from the other side of town before marrying someone her parents would approve of. She told him her father was dead and that the inheritance she carried was a burden she would trade for a single day back with him. She told him she loved him. Will looked her in the eyes and told her he did not love her. He walked out. The smartest person in Boston had just spoken the one thing he knew to be a complete lie to the one person who had actually reached him. He could not allow that. He never could. Back at MIT, Lambo pushed him about job offers and his future. Will picked up the mathematical proof he had been working on, struck a match, and held it to the paper, then dropped it burning onto the floor. Lambo dropped to his knees and scrambled across the floor to put it out and save the pages. A Fields Medal winner on his hands and knees rescuing work his janitor had just casually lit on fire. That was the state of things between them. Will went back to South Boston, back to the construction site, the bar, the boys, back to everything that had always been waiting for him. Then one afternoon, he and Chucky sat on the hood of the car after a long shift with beers going warm in their hands, and Chucky said what he had been saving.
20 years, if you're still living here, coming over my house to watch the Patriots game, still working construction, I'll fucking kill you.
He told Will he was his best friend, and not to take this the wrong way. But in 20 years, if Will was still living next door to him, coming over to watch football games and still working construction, he would consider it a tragedy.
You know what the best part of my day is? For about 10 seconds. Because I think maybe I'll get up there and I'll knock on the door and you won't be. You just left.
He told Will he was sitting on a winning lottery ticket and was too scared to cash it in. Then he said the quieter thing underneath all of it. He told Will that the best part of his day was the 10 seconds before he knocked on his door, because he let himself think that maybe this time Will would already be gone, that he would knock and Will would not be there, that he would have just left. Nothing Will had read in any library book had prepared him for that sentence. In his next session with Sean, the conversation finally went somewhere it had never gone before. Sean opened Will's court file, 3 foster homes, removed each time for serious physical abuse. He asked Will about it gently, and Will told him about a kitchen table with 3 objects laid on it: a belt, a stick, and a wrench.
He used to just put a wrench, a stick, and a belt and just say choose. He used to go with the wrench. Why the wrench? Just fuck him. That's why.
Sean asked which one he took. Will said the wrench. Sean asked why the wrench. Will said, that is why. Sean was quiet for a long time after that. Then he looked at Will and said something. Something so simple that it should not have had any power at all.
It's not your fault.
Yeah, I know that.
It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
Sean came around the desk and sat directly in front of Will. Close. The way you sit with someone when you are not going to let them look away. He told Will it was not his fault. Will said he knew. Sean said it again. Will said he knew. Sean said it a third time. Will said he knew. Sean moved closer and said it a fourth time. Will told him not to mess with him. Not with this. Sean said it one more time. It was not his fault. And the man who had an answer for everyone, who had dismantled every therapist and every professor and every Harvard student who tried to match him, who had solved problems that left the entire mathematics faculty of MIT standing in a hallway with their mouths open, completely fell apart. Not slowly, not carefully, all the way. He buried his face in his hands and wept the way a person weeps when they have been holding something for 20 years and the weight of it finally becomes more than any amount of intelligence can manage alone. Sean pulled him forward and held him the way a father holds a son who is long overdue for it. Two men from South Boston, each carrying a version of the same wound, finally in the same room long enough to put some of it down together. Will left that session different, not fixed, not a finished product. Just a person who had finally been told the truth about something he had been blaming himself for his entire life, by someone who had earned the right to say it. He took a job, one of the positions Lambo had arranged, called his new boss himself, and liked the way the man talked.
Is that what you want? Yeah, I think so. Good for you.
Told Sean about it in their final session, and Sean congratulated him with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had been right about something important and did not need to say so. He asked Will if that was what he wanted. Will said, yeah, he thought so. Sean said, good for him. His 21st birthday arrived. The boys gave him a beat-up old car that Chucky and Billy had rebuilt from spare parts over the previous months without saying a word about it. Will stood on the curb staring at the ugliest car he had ever seen in his life and felt something move through him that he did not have a word for. His final session with Sean ended the way it was always going to end. Two men who had earned each other standing at a door. Will asked if hugging violated the doctor-patient relationship. Sean told him only if he grabbed his backside.
It does violate the patient-doctor relationship. If you grab my ass.
They both laughed. Will walked out, found Lambo in the hallway, and told him if he ever got stuck on something to not be afraid to call. Lambo had to smile at that, the janitor offering the Fields Medal winner a lifeline on his way out the door. That evening, Will packed his car. Clothes, books, everything he owned fit without difficulty because he had never allowed himself to accumulate anything he might have to leave behind. He drove past Sean's apartment building and pulled over, got out, walked to the mailbox, slipped an envelope inside, raised the flag, and drove away. Sean came downstairs a few minutes later, opened the mailbox, and read what Will had left him. A single card. It said that if the professor called about that job, just tell him sorry. He had to go see about a girl. The same words Sean had used the night he gave up a historic World Series game to go talk to a woman he had never met, who became the love of his entire life. The student had finally understood the only lesson that actually mattered, not by being told it, but by living it. On the other side of town, Chucky pulled up in front of Will's apartment and knocked on the door. No answer. Knocked again. Looked through the window. And a slow, wide smile spread across his face that he could not have contained even if he had tried. Will was gone. The best part of Chucky Sullivan's day had finally arrived. The car moved down the highway and disappeared into the morning light. Will Hunting, 21 years old, a boy who had mopped floors and solved things nobody else on earth could touch, driving toward the first thing he had ever let himself actually want. If this story reached you the way it reached me, drop a comment below and tell me what moment hit you hardest. And if you are new here, subscribe because we tell stories exactly like this every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next.